Welcome to the Nutritional Quality and Meal Pattern module. I'm going to now discuss an important aspect of the National School Lunch Program. Meal components and quantities are critical areas of the review process. This webinar is going to focus on the nutritional quality of the meals served in the schools selected for review. The nutrient content of meals and compliance with the meal pattern form the foundation of the programs at your schools. Your reviewer will ensure through visual observation and a review of records that your reimbursable serving lines meet the daily and weekly requirements by their respective age and grade groups, and for all meal service lines. For schools implementing Offer versus Serve, we must ensure students are selecting a reimbursable meal and cashiers are recognizing the correct components. Furthermore, documentation must show that your menus are meeting the established nutrient standards for calories, saturated fat, trans fat, and now sodium. Well-balanced meals help students to perform their best, as well as providing the nutrients necessary for the child's developmental growth. In addition, reviewing the components and quantities ensures that meals reimbursed with federal dollars follow program regulations. The reviewer will determine whether the school offers students the required components and the required quantities as planned on the menu and all serving lines, ensures the milk requirements are met, gives students access to select required meal components on all reimbursable meal service lines, give students access to select required meal components on all reimbursable meal service lines. This is especially important in regards to the vegetable subgroups and whole grain rich foods. This includes any salad bars or food stations where students are able to create a reimbursable meal from this. This is especially important with the vegetable subgroups. All students must have access to the vegetables planned for the vegetable subgroup requirements. So if you have a salad bar in your school or some type of food service station or food bar, the menu planner needs to make sure that the line meets all of the meal components, including all the vegetable subgroups and whole grain rich. One vegetable subgroup that often gets overlooked is the legumes. So a solution is to have a small pan of some type of legume or bean on this line in order to be in compliance. Only count meals for reimbursement that contain the required components in the required quantities. As the last bullet on the slide indicates, your reviewer will spend some time observing your staff as they prepare food. This observation will give the reviewer an opportunity to see your food preparation methods in action and that standardized recipes are used. The website link handouts provide resources to various resources including meal components. There are also archived webinars that cover this content as well. Documentation to show the nutritional contribution of each food item to the meal pattern requirement must be available. These documents show how your meals meet the requirements. This includes production records, again this is for all reimbursable meals, child nutrition labels or CN labels, nutrition fact labels, manufacturer specification sheets, and any standardized recipes. As kind of an FYI on production records, any substitutions made to the planned menu must be recorded. If you have any salad bars and/or food station, as I have mentioned during this webinar, they too need to be documented on a production record. If you have any questions about these areas and would like additional guidance, again refer to the website link handout that has a link to the school-based child nutrition programs administrative programs. If you have any questions about these areas and would like additional guidance, again refer to the website link handout. Additional information can be found on our website, found under the menu planning section. If a school implements Offer versus Serve, your reviewer will also observe those procedures during the on-site meal service observation. Offer versus Serve allows students to decline some of the food offered. The goal of Offer versus Serve is to reduce food waste while permitting students to decline foods they do not intend to eat. Menu planners must ensure they provide adequate amounts of all food components and items so that schools prepare and offer enough food on all reimbursable meal service lines to meet the meal pattern requirements. Signage must be posted on the service line to assist students in identifying a reimbursable meal. At breakfast and lunch, students must select a half a cup of fruit and/or a vegetable. The new review process now requires us to assess fiscal action if a half a cup of fruit or a vegetable is not taken. In grades 9 to 12, if 2 of the 3 components selected are fruits and vegetables, 1 fruit or the vegetable may be a half cup portion, but the second fruit or vegetable must be a full cup. Let me give you an example. If a high school student had 2 ounces of turkey, again, that's the minimum portion for a meat alternative is 2 ounces. They also have a half a cup of peaches. Then the student must take 1 cup of a vegetable. Again, as I said, 2 ounces is the minimum portion for the meat alternative component. 1 cup is the minimum vegetable component. This gives us 2 components. And then the student completed the Offer versus Serve requirement by selecting a half a cup of fruit. Another example could include the following on the student's tray: a chef salad that encompasses 2 ounces of meat alternative, 2 cups of romaine mix. Again, if you remember, this would equal 1 cup of vegetable because it's a leafy green, and mandarin oranges, which is a half a cup of fruit. Again, to recap Offer versus Serve, students must select a minimum of 3 components at lunch or 3 items at breakfast to make a reimbursable meal. If a half a cup is not taken, the meal will be disallowed and will require fiscal action. Again, if you have any questions as it relates to Offer versus Serve, you can contact our office and we're happy to help you. Here's some Offer versus Serve signage that you can use. The top left picture of the today's menu was mailed to all the school food authorities over a year ago to help you be in compliance. If you need any more of these, you can call the office to have more mailed to you. The other poster on the top right is from USDA and it is for lunch meal service. And the bottom poster is for breakfast. Because you are responsible for recording reimbursable meals, cashiers and clerks play an important role with Offer versus Serve. Training on Offer versus Serve should occur on a regular basis. They must be trained to accurately recognize a reimbursable meal from a la carte purchases, including appropriate quantities, judging portions, and the required meal components needed to make a meal. This is extremely important when salad bars and food stations are offered. If you have a salad bar or a finishing bar that has fresh and/or canned fruit and vegetable choices on it, or some type of self-serve food station, it is recommended that you place signage on this bar. This could include what a portion size is and what is needed to make a reimbursable meal. For further help with Offer versus Serve training, we have training materials that you can use with your staff. They can be found by going to our Nutrition and Wellness homepage, clicking on the National School Lunch link, then clicking on the USDA meal pattern and menu planning information. In past reviews, some of the common findings in the Nutritional Quality and Meal Pattern section of the Administrative Review include the following. A required component was not offered. For example, missing the grain bread component completely. There was never a grain bread offered. Grain items that were presented as whole grain rich were not whole grain rich. When child nutrition labels are not available, a determination cannot be made to validate the contribution of the food item to the meal pattern requirements. Offer versus Serve was not implemented correctly. Students were not required to have a half a cup of fruit or vegetable on their tray, or they were required to take milk or some other component that is not required to be selected. If your school is Offer versus Serve, It is not required to take the milk. I will often see, especially at elementary levels, where the staff is making the students take milk. The same scenario goes for schools that are serve only and do not allow students to have a choice. In those circumstances, students must take all components. School food authorities have the choice in WINS to elect some grades to be serve and some grades to be offer versus serve. If you're not sure how to do this in WINS, please contact any of our school lunch staff and they can help you. Fiscal action is assessed for the following. Fiscal action is required when a meal component is not offered or when a tray at the point of service does not have the required number of components. With offer versus serve, no fruit or vegetable on the tray, or an insufficient vegetable or fruit quantity will be a disallowed meal. In addition to observing on the day of review for each site selected for the review, the reviewer will select a 5-day week during the review period to conduct a more in-depth evaluation of the menu. Based upon the evaluation of the menu's production records, recipes, and other supporting documentation, a determination will be made if the menu meets the daily and weekly requirements. We must also verify that the milk, whole grain rich, and vegetable subgroup requirements have been met. The reviewer will use the 6-cent menu worksheet to confirm your selected week of menus have met the daily and weekly requirements. Production records, child nutrition labels, and standardized recipes play an important supporting role for your menus. Production records must be completed daily for breakfast and lunch. Production records show what you served and how much, and is the only proof that a reimbursable meal was offered in the adequate portions. All food items used in the reimbursable meal, including condiments and milk, must be listed. For each food item listed, the planned portion size by grade and the number of servings prepared must be identified on your production record. I just want to remind you again, the number of servings prepared must reflect reimbursable meals, as well as those servings planned for a la carte and adult sales. The total amount of food used must be recorded. Lastly, the number of servings leftovers must be calculated and documented on your production record. And don't forget to document any substitutions. Also, be very careful when you have substitutions that you are substituting with a like food item. For example, if the original menu called for carrots, and for whatever reason you did not have carrots available, substitute this item with another red-orange vegetable. Unfortunately, I've seen circumstances where substitutions were made, and as a result, they did not meet the weekly requirements. If your reviewer finds that one or more of the 5 required components is missing from any of the days of the selected week, the reimbursement for meals from that day or days will be disallowed. Here are some examples of child nutrition labels and standardized recipe. Please note the following. A child nutrition label must come from the manufacturer, not the distributor, such as Cisco, U.S. Foods, Fox River, etc. It must come from the manufacturer. If your distributor has copies from the manufacturer, you can use these, or you can get this information from the manufacturer's website. Anything processed must have a child nutrition label to validate the contribution. This includes chicken nuggets, corn dogs, fish sticks, canned ravioli, meatballs, breaded chicken patties, hamburgers, the list goes on and on. Standardized recipes are required when 2 or more ingredients are combined. The recipe must state the ingredients, the amount, whether that be in weight or volume, the yield, and the portion size. It is also very handy if you have the USDA fact sheets for any items you are using. For example, there are at least 10 USDA commodity hamburger patties. Your reviewer will not know which one you are using, so having a copy of the commodity fact sheet for that respective food item is very helpful. Here's an example of a product formulation statement, or we call it a PFS, a nutrition fact label. The product formulation statement again must come from the manufacturer, not your distributor. The nutrition fact labels are required for everything except for fresh vegetables and fruit. When you do not have these documents for the reviewer, they are then unable to validate how the food item contributes to the meal pattern requirements. If significant or serious menu errors are revealed for the selected week, then your reviewer is required to expand the menu evaluation to the entire review month. Our reviews last school year found several errors with the selected weeks of menus. Quite possibly, the biggest finding was that child nutrition labels or product formulation statements were not available. When this documentation is not on file, then it is impossible for us to know how your food item supported the meal pattern requirements, especially with portion sizes and the whole grain rich requirement. We also found many of the menus lacking in regards to the vegetable subgroup requirements. You must especially make sure you're meeting the requirements for beans and legumes, dark green, and red-orange vegetable subgroups. As I said earlier, production records are vital to support what you served and how much you served. These must be done on a daily basis for breakfast, lunch, and after-school snack programs. When errors are found at the School Food Authority with central and satellite kitchens, or could be district-wide menus, the state agency must assess fiscal action for all sites reviewed and non-reviewed sites in which non-reimbursable meals were served. The rationale for this is that even though meals were prepared in a single location, the non-reimbursable meals were served throughout the district. Missing a meal component requires immediate fiscal action. For example, if a vegetable is not offered at all. Missing production records. School food authorities are required to maintain documentation that demonstrates how meals offered meet the meal patterns. Your production record is the only way to prove what you offered. This includes all reimbursable meals, breakfast, lunch, your snack program, and even the summer food program if you're operating that. If there are repeat violations, such as the vegetable subgroup, milk type, portion sizes, and whole grain rich violations are only assessed fiscal action when they are repeat violations, which means they take place from one administrative review to the next, and they are assessed at the School Food Authority level. So if during your review it was cited that red-orange vegetable portion for the week of review was inadequate, there is no fiscal action for this year. But if the same finding happens the next time we come in 3 years, we will take fiscal action for all meals. In addition to the meal pattern requirements, menus will also be evaluated to ensure they are complying with federal standards for calories, saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium. If you have more than one school selected to be reviewed, not all of your school menus will be evaluated for the nutrient standard. Only one school will receive a targeted review. To determine the one site which will receive this targeted menu review, your reviewer will complete a USDA form called the Meal Compliance Assessment Tool for each school reviewed to determine which site will receive the in-depth menu review. When only one site is required to be reviewed, that site will automatically receive the targeted menu review. Let's discuss the Meal Compliance Assessment Tool a little more in depth for school food authorities who have 2 or more sites being reviewed. A copy of the Meal Compliance Assessment Tool is a handout on our webpage, which can be found by going to our Nutrition and Wellness homepage, click on the National School Lunch link, and click on the Monitoring and Review information. The Meal Compliance Assessment Tool will only be completed when 2 or more sites are reviewed. It will not be completed if only one site is reviewed. USDA has assigned risk factors, low or high, to the data collected on the Meal Compliance Assessment tool. The questions include, in addition to the school lunch program, which of the following child nutrition programs operate at this school? The higher number of programs, the higher the risk. 2. Grade groups. The more grade groups, the higher the risk. 3. Last state agency review shows violations of the critical areas. Again, that would put you at a higher risk. 4. Number of serving lines. The more serving lines, the higher the risk. 5. Self-service, which equates to a higher risk. 6. Cycle menus. That would put you at a lower risk. 7. Alternate meal locations. That would put you at higher risk. And 8. New manager. That would put you at a higher risk. The school whose score shows them to be the highest risk in the district will receive a targeted menu review. Just because a site has been identified as high risk does not really mean there are problems. It just means that their possibility for problems may be greater. This is because the more that is happening in the school food service, the more chance errors may occur. On the slide is a snapshot of the handout on our website. Your reviewer may work with you prior to the scheduled on-site review to complete these sections. The next step in this process is the reviewer will then complete another tool called the Dietary Specification Assessment Tool at the targeted school to further examine the school's compliance with the nutrient standards for calories, saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium. The Dietary Specification Assessment Tool can be found on our website, which is the same page where the Meal Compliance Assessment Tool is located. This is another tool that has high and low risk rankings. Prior to observing any meal preparation and meal service practices at the targeted menu site, your reviewer will interview food service staff and complete the tool. Again, your reviewer may email this document to you and go over ahead of time. Then an observation of the on-site preparation and serving practices will be observed to ensure they are consistent with the practices discussed during the reviewer's interview with food service staff. After completing the on-site observation, if the school is identified as low risk, then no further action is required and a nutrient analysis will not be conducted. If the reviewer's on-site observation concludes that the targeted site is high risk, a nutrient analysis will be conducted for both breakfast and lunch. It will be based upon student menu choices. One analysis will be conducted for each grade group and the menu type at the site selected for the targeted menu review. Remember, low-risk sites will not receive a nutrient analysis. Here's a snapshot of what the Dietary Specification Assessment Tool looks like. As you look at this handout more closely, it is pretty obvious which questions trigger a high versus a low risk factor. Therefore, if you have good menu practices, you will likely be low risk. Use this as a guide in your overall menu planning practices. A few of the glaring food service practices we observed last school year included salt shakers available to the students either on the serving line or on the tables. We also heard that non-credible cheese products, such as cheese sauce, are frequently used in food preparation. Through observations, especially at the end of meal service, we saw students being served larger portions or seconds. Also, offering bonus items such as a bowl of peanut butter at the end of the line is not appropriate. Menu planners should also strive to remove non-reimbursable foods from the menus, such as potato chips, ice cream, pudding, etc. Fiscal action for a repeated dietary specification violation from one administrative review to the next one for the same citation and/or finding. For example, if you are cited in your upcoming review that saturated fat exceeded the standards, if the same finding of saturated fat occurs on the next review in 3 years, then fiscal action will be assessed for meals. It does not matter if the finding was in different schools. This assessment would be for any school in the district. Throughout this webinar, I have discussed fiscal action for each section. As a general rule, for overall fiscal action, USDA allows us to disregard overclaims if the overclaim does not exceed $600 per program. The National School Lunch Program also encompasses Seamless Summer Option, Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and the After-School Snack. A separate $600 disregard exists for the School Breakfast Program and the Special Milk Program. Overall, if fiscal action is assessed and if it's less than $600, we do not take back a penny. However, we will not disregard any overclaim where there is a substantial evidence of criminal law violations or civil fraud statutes. At the conclusion of the entire review, your reviewer will want to meet with you and all other pertinent staff to discuss the results of the review. The exit conference is a great opportunity for technical assistance, so please ask questions, especially if an area seems unclear. Within 4 to 6 weeks of the exit conference, the findings of the review will be conveyed to you in a written report. The written report will ask you to submit a written corrective action plan. The corrective action plan must address each violation with a plan on how to permanently correct the problem found. Your reviewer will evaluate your corrective action, and he or she may get in touch with you for more detailed information. It is common for there to be some back and forth communication between you and the reviewer before the final corrective action plan is accepted. When the corrective action plan is finally accepted, we will issue what we call a closure letter. If there was fiscal action over $600, it would be at this time that those funds would be requested. Sometimes the funds are recovered in future claims. At other times, we request that you send the funds back to the state by mailing a check. If you have any questions as it relates to this section of this training module, please feel free to contact our office via phone or email. We appreciate your time in viewing this training module and hope you find it helpful.